Right now, as you listen these words, there is a voice speaking inside your head. Not this voice, not the one narrating this sentence, the other one, the one underneath, the one that has been running since before you woke up this morning, the one that will still be running when you lie down tonight. The one that speaks so constantly and so familiarly that you no longer recognize it as a voice at all. You experience it as you, as your own thinking, as the natural, unremarkable stream of consciousness that accompanies every moment of your waking life. But here is what no one has ever explained to you clearly enough. That voice is not narrating your life. It is building it. Every sentence it speaks is a brick. Every phrase it repeats is a load-bearing wall. And the structure it has been assembling quietly, relentlessly, without your conscious oversight, is the life you are currently standing inside of. You did not end up here by accident. You talked yourself here, one internal sentence at a time. Most people, when they hear the phrase "talk to yourself," picture affirmations. They picture standing in front of a mirror, looking themselves in the eye, and reciting something they read in a book. I am worthy. I am abundant. I am magnetic. And for most of those people, the experience feels hollow. It feels performative. It feels like lying to their own face while their stomach quietly disagrees with every word. So they do it for a few days, feel ridiculous, and stop. And then they conclude that self-talk doesn't work, that it's a gimmick, that the people who promote it are either delusional or selling something. But here is what they missed entirely. Self-talk was never about the 5 minutes of affirmation you perform in the morning. It was always about the other 23 hours and 55 minutes. The thousands of sentences you speak to yourself every single day that you never notice, never examine, and never question. The internal monologue that has been shaping your identity, your expectations, your emotional baseline, and your perception of what is possible since before you could tie your shoes. That is where your reality is being written, not in the brief, forced performance of positivity, in the vast, unmonitored conversation you are having with yourself when no one, including you, is paying attention. The person who recites, "I am abundant," for 3 minutes and then spends the next 12 hours thinking, "I can't believe how expensive everything is. I'll never get ahead. Nothing ever works out for me," is not using self-talk to change their reality. They are using it to reinforce the old one with a thin, unconvincing coat of paint on top. The paint doesn't hold. It never does. Because the wall underneath is built from a completely different material, and the wall always wins. Let me show you what is actually happening when you talk to yourself, because the mechanism is more precise and more consequential than you have ever been told. Your subconscious mind does not evaluate your internal statements for accuracy. It does not fact-check your thoughts. It does not pause when you think, "I'm terrible with money," and say, "Let me verify that against your actual financial history." It receives every internal statement as an instruction, a directive, a command to be fulfilled. Your subconscious mind is the most obedient, most tireless, most literal employee you will ever have. It does exactly what you tell it to do, and you are telling it things all day long. Think of your inner voice as an architect standing over a blueprint table. Every sentence you think is a line drawn on the paper. "I always attract the wrong people." That is a line. The architect notes it and begins designing a social reality that confirms it. "I'm not the kind of person who gets lucky." Another line. The architect adjusts the blueprint accordingly, engineering a life where fortunate breaks consistently arrive one room over from where you are standing. Things like that don't happen for people like me. A thick, dark line, a foundational wall. The architect builds the entire structure around it. Now, these are not dramatic, occasional thoughts. These are the quiet, habitual, almost invisible phrases that cycle through your mind hundreds of times a day. You barely notice them. They feel as natural as breathing, but they are not neutral. They are not passive observations about the way things are. They are active instructions about the way things will continue to be. Your subconscious does not know the difference between a description and a command. When you think, "I'm so tired of struggling," your subconscious does not hear a complaint. It hears a confirmation. It hears you affirming that struggle is your current state, and it interprets its job as maintaining that state with as much consistency and precision as it can manage. And it is extraordinarily good at its job. This is why your life keeps producing the same patterns even when you change your external circumstances. You switch jobs, you move cities, you end a relationship and start a new one. But the themes repeat, the feelings repeat. The outcomes wear different costumes but tell the same story, because you brought the architect with you. You brought the blueprint. The internal conversation never changed, so the structure being built never changed either. You were redecorating rooms inside the same building, wondering why the view from every window looked the same. Now, here is where this gets both uncomfortable and liberating. If your inner voice has been unconsciously designing your life, that means it can consciously redesign it. But the redesign does not happen the way most people attempt it. It does not happen through force. It does not happen through gritting your teeth and shouting new beliefs over the top of old ones. It happens through something far quieter, far more disciplined, and far more effective. It happens through changing the quality of your default inner conversation, not the special occasion conversation, not the 5 minutes of morning practice. The default, the way you speak to yourself when you spill coffee on your shirt, the way you speak to yourself when you check your bank balance, the way you speak to yourself when someone doesn't text back, the way you speak to yourself when you look in the mirror on an unremarkable Wednesday afternoon with no one watching and no performance to give. That is where your reality lives. That is where the blueprint is drawn. And that is where the shift must happen. Think of it this way. Imagine you have been listening to the same radio station for 30 years. The same playlist, the same tone, the same emotional atmosphere, playing on a loop so constant that you have forgotten the radio is even on. You think the music is just the sound of life. You think the melancholy ballads and the anxious talk segments are simply what existence sounds like. But they are not. They are what your station sounds like. And there are other stations. Stations playing entirely different music. Stations broadcasting calm where yours broadcasts tension. Stations transmitting certainty where yours transmits doubt. You do not need to destroy the old station. You do not need to wage war against it. You simply need to change the dial. Gently, deliberately, and then hold it there long enough for the new music to become the new normal. So what does this look like in practice? What does it sound like to change the station of your inner voice? The first thing you must do is listen. Before you change anything, you must hear what is already being said. Most people have never done this. They have never sat quietly and simply observed the content of their own inner conversation. They have been so identified with the voice that they have never stepped back far enough to hear it as something separate from themselves. For one full day, make it your practice to notice, not to judge, not to correct, just to notice. When you wake up, what is the first thing the voice says? When you look at yourself, what does it comment? When you encounter a challenge, what is its immediate interpretation? When you think about your future, what tone does it take? Treat yourself like a researcher studying a subject. You are not the voice. You are the one listening to it. And what you will discover, if you are honest, is startling. You will discover that the voice is not kind. It is not supportive. It is not speaking to you the way you would ever speak to someone you loved. In many cases, it is speaking to you with a cruelty you would never tolerate from another human being. And you have been absorbing every word as truth for your entire adult life. Write down the phrases you catch, the recurring ones, the ones that play on the heaviest rotation. You may find sentences like, "I'm not smart enough for that," or "That's too good for me," or "Something will go wrong. It always does," or Who am I kidding? These are the sentences running your life. These are the lines on the blueprint. And until you see them written in your own handwriting on a physical page, they will continue to operate in the dark, building walls you don't remember authorizing. The second step is not to fight these sentences. This is where almost everyone goes wrong. They hear the negative self-talk, they recognize it as damaging, and they immediately try to overpower it with the opposite statement. The voice says, "I'm not enough," and they shout back, "I am enough," with the energy of someone trying to win an argument. But this approach fails for a specific reason. You cannot defeat a thought by opposing it directly, because the opposition itself keeps the original thought alive. Every time you push against "I'm not enough," you are engaging with "I'm not enough." You are giving it your attention, your energy, your focus. You are keeping it at the center of the conversation. The content of the conversation has shifted, but the subject has not. You are still talking about your enoughness. You are still orbiting the wound. Instead, the practice is redirection, not opposition. Redirection. When the old sentence arises, you do not argue with it. You notice it the way you would notice a cloud passing across the sky. You see it. You let it move. And then, without force, without drama, you gently introduce the sentence you are choosing to think instead. Not as a rebuttal, as a replacement. The way you would change a channel. You do not stand in front of the television and argue with the program you don't want to watch. You simply pick up the remote and select something different. And here is the critical part that separates this from hollow affirmation. The new sentence must be one you can feel, even slightly, even a fraction. It does not need to be a quantum leap from where you are. If the old sentence is, "I'll never have enough money," the new sentence does not need to be, "I am a millionaire." Your nervous system will reject that. It will register the gap between the statement and your current experience, and it will file the whole thing under fiction. But you might be able to feel the truth in something softer. Something like, "I am learning to allow money to come to me more easily," or "My financial situation is beginning to shift in ways I may not fully see yet." These sentences are not lies. They are invitations. They open a door without demanding that you leap through it. And your subconscious, that obedient architect, hears them and begins to adjust the blueprint, just enough to let new possibilities in. Over time, as the new sentence repeats and the feeling of it deepens, you can expand it. You can let it grow bolder, but always at the pace of genuine feeling, never faster than your body can follow. Because it is the feeling behind the words that the subconscious registers as instruction. Words without feeling are just sounds. Words drenched in genuine emotion are commands that reshape the architecture of your experience. There is another dimension of self-talk that most people never consider, and it may be the most powerful one of all. It is not just what you say about your circumstances. It is what you say about yourself. Your identity statements. The sentences that begin with "I am," or "I always," or "I never." These are the deepest lines on the blueprint. They are not describing what you have or what happens to you. They are describing what you are, and your subconscious treats them with a reverence it gives to nothing else. When you say, "I am unlucky," you are not making a comment about probability. You are issuing an identity declaration that your subconscious will defend with the ferocity of a bodyguard protecting a client. It will arrange your perceptions, filter your attention, and guide your behavior to ensure that the identity holds. It will make you overlook the opportunities that disprove it. It will amplify the experiences that confirm it. It will literally alter what you are able to see and not see so that your external world matches the internal declaration. This works in both directions with equal precision. I am the kind of person who figures things out. I am someone people trust. I am naturally drawn to the right decisions. These sentences, when repeated with genuine feeling until they sink below the surface of conscious thought and into the subconscious operating system, begin to reorganize your life from the inside out. Not because the words are magic, because the identity shift they create changes the instructions the architect is working from. New blueprints produce new buildings. And you start to notice, with a quiet surprise that builds into an unshakable knowing, that your life is rearranging itself around the person you declared yourself to be. Now, I need to be honest with you about what happens when you begin this work in earnest. Because the transition is not smooth. It is not a gentle upward curve from the old voice to the new one. There is a period, and it can last days or weeks, where you will feel like two people. The old voice will not surrender quietly. It has been running the show for decades. It has neural pathways carved so deep they feel like canyons. And when you begin introducing a new voice, the old one will get louder. Not because you are failing, because you are succeeding. The old voice amplifies precisely when it is losing ground. It stages its most convincing performance in the final act, before its authority dissolves. You will have mornings where the new voice feels natural and clear, where you speak to yourself with a warmth and a steadiness that surprises you, where you feel genuinely different. And then you will have an afternoon where the old voice returns with such force, such familiarity, such persuasive certainty, that you wonder if the morning was a delusion. It was not. The morning was real. The afternoon is the old system fighting for survival, and your only job is to not hand it back the keys. You do not need to silence the old voice. You do not need to vanquish it in some heroic inner battle. You simply need to stop obeying it. There is a profound difference between hearing a thought and following a thought. You can hear, "Nothing ever works out for me," pass through your mind the same way you hear a stranger's conversation on the street. You register it. You do not sit down and join them. You keep walking. You return to the voice you are choosing. And every time you do this, every single time you catch the old sentence and gently redirect to the new one, you are strengthening a neural pathway that will eventually become the default. You are laying new track for the train to run on. The first few passes are rough. The track is fragile, but with repetition, it solidifies. And one day, the new voice is the one that speaks first. The old one becomes the visitor. And then eventually, the stranger you no longer recognize. There is something else that happens as your inner dialogue shifts, something that catches people off guard because no one prepares them for it. The world starts responding differently, not in some vague, abstract metaphysical sense, in concrete, observable, undeniable ways. The colleague who always overlooked you suddenly asks for your opinion. The opportunity you would have talked yourself out of pursuing last month feels natural to reach for. The financial situation that seemed cemented in place begins to loosen in ways you did not orchestrate. Conversations go differently. Eye contact feels different. The energy in rooms changes when you walk in. Not because you are performing confidence, because confidence is no longer a performance. It is the residue of an inner conversation that now speaks of you with respect instead of contempt. People will notice the shift before you can fully explain it. They will say you seem different, lighter, more certain. They will not be able to name what changed because the change is invisible. It lives in the tone of voice you use inside your own skull. It lives in the quiet sentence you repeat to yourself when no one is around. It lives in the space between a triggering event and your response. A space that used to be filled with the old story and is now filled with something steadier, something truer, something you chose instead of something you inherited. I want to leave you with an image, because images lodge deeper than instructions and last longer than advice. Imagine that every word you speak to yourself is a drop of water falling into a still pond. Each drop creates a ripple, and those ripples move outward in every direction, touching every edge of the pond, shaping the surface of your entire life. You have been dropping the same words into the same pond for years, decades, and the ripples they create have become so familiar that you mistake them for the natural current of the water. You think that is simply how your pond moves, but it is not. The water has no inherent current. The ripples are coming from you. They have always been coming from you. Now imagine choosing a different word, a single, deliberate, gently felt word, and dropping it into the center of the pond. The ripple it creates is small at first, almost imperceptible against the larger waves still rolling from the old drops. But you drop it again the next day, and the day after that, and slowly, unmistakably, the new ripple begins to interact with the old ones. It begins to soften them, to redirect them, to replace the pattern on the surface with something new. And one morning, you look at your pond, and the water is different. The surface is different. The movement is different. Not because someone came and drained the old water and filled it with new, because you changed what you were dropping into it, one word at a time, one day at a time, with a patience that most people never give themselves permission to practice. Your inner voice is the drop. Your life is the pond. And the ripple has already started moving the moment you decide to speak to yourself as though you are someone worth speaking to, with kindness, with conviction, and with the quiet authority of a person who has finally understood that the conversation inside their own mind was never background noise. It was the command center all along, and you just took your seat.